The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. The Invitation. Eleanor Vance sat in her small, cluttered room, a tangible reminder of the years that had slipped by in monotonous servitude to her ailing mother. The letter she held was an anomaly in her otherwise uneventful life, its fresh ink spelling out an opportunity she never dared to dream of. "You are cordially invited to spend a summer at Hill House." It beckoned, promising a respite from the relentless demands of her mother's care and the suffocating routine that had become her existence. With heart pounding in anticipation, Eleanor envisioned the escape that lay within those words. Her suitcase snapped shut, packed with a haste born of years of suppressed longing. The car, a shared lifeline with her sister, seemed to whisper of freedom from the driveway. Eleanor's conscience twinged at the thought of taking it without permission, but the allure of Hill House and the promise of something more than her wearisome life was too potent to resist. "I'll be back before they know," she murmured, trying to quell the tremor of guilt with the echo of adventure. As the familiar sights of her neighborhood receded, replaced by the serpentine paths leading to Hill House, Eleanor's mind teetered between exhilaration and trepidation. "What am I doing?" she pondered, the wheels of the car mirroring the churning of her thoughts. "Am I really running away? Is this some impulsive folly, or am I finally taking control of my life? Hill House. It sounds so intriguing, so unlike anything I've ever known. But what if it's a mistake? What if I'm not cut out for whatever awaits me there?" As the miles slipped by, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting an orange hue over the landscape. Eleanor's excitement mingled with a growing sense of apprehension as she considered the enigmatic Dr. Montague and the other guests who would be joining her at Hill House. Who are these people, and why was I chosen? Am I truly prepared for whatever unusual experiences lie ahead? Upon reaching the gates of Hill House, Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Looming before her was a formidable structure that seemed to embody the very essence of darkness and secrecy. The imposing front entrance, with its polished hallway and roofed veranda, exuded an air of foreboding. As she stepped inside, the oppressive atmosphere enveloped her, the silence heavy with anticipation. The great door with its intricate carvings seemed to guard ancient secrets, and the dimly lit upper floors hinted at hidden mysteries and untold stories. Eleanor's gaze fell upon the woman who stood before her, and she instantly recognized the mischievous glint in Theodora's eye. Well, well, another brave soul lured by the promise of Hill House," Theodora said, her voice a melodic lilt with a hint of hidden depths. "I received the invitation too. Couldn't resist the temptation, could you?" A playful smile danced across her face, as if she were already plotting their shared adventures within those enigmatic walls. Eleanor felt a surge of relief at the sight of Theodora, a kindred spirit in this unfamiliar realm. Together they ascended the stairs, their footsteps echoing in the vast hallway. The blue room, with its monochromatic decor, welcomed Eleanor like a soothing embrace after the long journey. Yet, even as she unpacked her suitcase, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes, the house itself seeming to whisper secrets in the shadows. The arrival. Eleanor awoke in the blue room to the sound of rain. She lay there for a moment, reflecting on the previous night's events, questioning her own behavior and the reactions of the others. With a sigh, she dismissed her doubts and prepared to face the day. Theodora, already up and about, greeted her with a cheerful good morning and mentioned breakfast was waiting. Eleanor, pushing aside her thoughts, joined Theodora in the dining room where Luke was already seated, eating heartily. They exchanged pleasantries, and Eleanor felt a sense of camaraderie with her companions. Despite the rain, the day held a promise of discovery and the chance to forge deeper connections with her fellow guests at Hill House. The breakfast conversation was light, avoiding any talk of the house's past. They discussed their plans for the day, deciding to explore the grounds despite the rain. Eleanor, feeling more at ease with Theodora and Luke, was curious about the history of Hill House. They agreed to start in the library, where old records and photographs might offer insights into the mansion's mysterious allure. As they left the dining room, Eleanor couldn't help but feel a tinge of excitement, mixed with a hint of apprehension about what they might discover. The unseen presence. Eleanor shivered as she stepped into the dimly lit corridor of Hill House. The air was thick with a chill that seemed to seep into her bones. "Do you feel that?" she whispered to Theodora, who walked beside her, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. They moved cautiously, the silence around them broken only by the distant sound of a clock ticking somewhere in the depths of the mansion. As they passed a grand mirror, Eleanor caught a glimpse of a shadow flitting behind them. She spun around, but there was nothing, only the empty hallway stretching back the way they had come. They continued on, entering the library where Dr. Montague was poring over an old leather-bound book. Luke, lounging in an armchair with a look of bored amusement, chuckled. But Eleanor wasn't convinced. The unseen force was palpable, a living entity that wrapped itself around her like a shroud. She felt its presence in every creak of the wooden floorboards, every groan of the old house settling into its foundations. "I've been researching the history of Hill House," Dr. Montague said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Did you know that former tenants have reported strange occurrences? Doors slamming shut, objects moving on their own. Some even claim to have seen apparitions." Theodora snorted. "Just old wives' tales, Doctor. You can't seriously believe." A faint giggle echoed through the hallway, making Eleanor's skin crawl. Theodora's eyes darted toward the door, but she said nothing. As they stood there, frozen in unease, Eleanor knew better. The unseen presence was real, and it was watching her, waiting for her. Their exploration led them deeper into the labyrinthine halls of Hill House. The walls seemed to whisper secrets of the past, and Eleanor felt the weight of countless untold stories pressing down upon her. In the dim light, they stumbled upon a narrow door half hidden behind a tapestry. With a shared glance, Eleanor and Theodora pushed it open, revealing a spiral staircase winding down into darkness. As they descended, the air grew colder, and Eleanor's breath formed misty clouds in front of her. At the bottom, they found themselves in a long-forgotten chamber, its walls lined with shelves of dusty books and faded portraits staring down at them. In the center of the room, a large table was strewn with yellowed papers and ancient tomes. Theodora picked up a leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. "Look at this," she said, her voice trembling. "It's a diary, belonging to the original owner of Hill House." They pored over the entries, each one revealing more of the dark history that had seeped into the very stones of the mansion. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through the room, and the door slammed shut behind them. Eleanor's heart raced as she turned to see the shadows dancing along the walls, forming shapes that were almost human. Theodora clutched the diary to her chest. Echoes of the past. In the heart of Hill House, Eleanor, Theodora, Luke, and Dr. Montague were drawn to an old scrapbook in the library, a room where the air was thick with the essence of bygone eras. "This is extraordinary," Luke murmured as he revealed the contents of the book, filled with Hugh Crane's handwritten notes, drawings, and clippings that chronicled the house's sorrowful legacy. Hugh Crane, the architect of Hill House, had envisioned it as a sanctuary for his family, a place where his lineage could flourish. Yet fate had woven a different story. His wife perished before laying eyes on the home, and subsequent marriages ended in untimely deaths. The house, once a symbol of hope, became a vessel of grief, absorbing the tragedies of the Crane family. Eleanor's fingers traced the outlines of a colored plate depicting a snake pit, a chilling choice for a child's lesson. "It's tragic," she whispered, "to think of the young Crane girl surrounded by such darkness." Luke, often the skeptic, agreed solemnly. "It's as if Hugh's despair bled into these pages, intending to educate through fear." The group delved deeper into the scrapbook, each page a testament to the house's grim narrative. Eleanor shuddered at a sketch of a menacing figure overshadowing a child. Hugh wanted to impart wisdom about life's realities, but his approach was steeped in the macabre. Dr. Montague, with a furrowed brow, added, his own losses shadowed his teachings, turning them into lessons of caution and fear rather than hope. Theodora, her eyes reflecting a mix of concern and intrigue, sought to break the somber reflection. I suppose we can be grateful that our own upbringings were less Gothic, she said, attempting to inject a hint of levity into the heavy atmosphere. Their laughter, a brief respite, was swallowed by the vastness of the library. As they closed the scrapbook, the echo of their chuckles seemed out of place, an intrusion upon the solemnity that the house commanded. They exited the library, each lost in thought, the weight of Hill House's history lingering like a whisper in their minds. The bond. Eleanor sat in the dimly lit drawing room, the heavy silence of Hill House pressing around her. Theodora, lounging across from her, broke the stillness. You know, Nell, this place could use a bit of your laughter, she said, a playful smile dancing on her lips. Eleanor chuckled, acknowledging the truth in Theodora's words. Hill House has its own rules, she replied, her gaze wandering to the window where the shadows of the night seemed to creep closer. Theodora sat up, her eyes reflecting a seriousness that Eleanor had come to appreciate. But I do. Tell me, what was it like, caring for your mother all those years? Eleanor hesitated, the memories flooding back. It was consuming. I read to her, played cards, and was always there, just beside her. She paused, her voice barely a whisper. And when she passed, I was left searching for my new place in the world. Theodora reached out, her hand gently squeezing Eleanor's. You're more than that, Nell. You're brave, kind, and here with me, facing the unknown. A small smile tugged at Eleanor's lips. And you, always so bold and unafraid, like when you suggested hide and seek in these halls, undeterred by the whispers of the past. With a sigh, Theodora leaned back. Distraction, I suppose, from expectations, from judgment, from the constant pressure to be someone I'm not. She glanced around the room, her gaze hardening. But here, in this place, I feel like I can just be me. And you, Eleanor, you've been a true friend through it all. I know why. Just then, a faint knock at the door broke the silence. Theodora rose to answer it and returned with a letter in her hand. The envelope was sealed with an unfamiliar emblem, and her expression changed as she read the contents. Eleanor's curiosity was piqued. What is it, Theo? She asked, noticing the concern etched on Theodora's face. Theodora hesitated before answering. It's a letter, addressed to me. It says, beware of the cold spots, for they hold more than just shadows. Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine as Theodora continued. I don't know what it means, but it feels ominous. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden cold draft, and the flicker of candlelight cast eerie shadows across the walls. As they settled into an uneasy silence, Eleanor thought about the bond they had formed. A bond that seemed as much a part of Hill House as the spirits that lingered in its halls. It was a bond forged in darkness and fear, but also in understanding and companionship. A bond that would not be easily broken. Whispers in the dark. Eleanor and Theodora huddled together, their eyes darting anxiously around the parlor. The fire crackled, providing little comfort against the encroaching cold. Did you hear that? Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. Theodora nodded, her gaze fixed on the door. It's the house settling, she said, her tone betraying her uncertainty. But the noises persisted, loud bangs and crashes, like iron weights being dropped upstairs, and a relentless pounding that seemed to vibrate through the walls. Eleanor's eyes searched the room, her fear palpable. It's getting closer. With a determined stride, Theodora rose, her quilt falling unnoticed to the floor. I've had enough. We won't be scared by some noises. Eleanor watched as Theodora flung the door open, revealing an empty hallway. See? Nothing there, Theodora said, quickly shutting the door again. They tried to laugh, to dismiss their fears as overactive imaginations. But the cold spots that crept through the room, sending shivers down their spines, and the whispers that slithered through the air like icy tendrils told a different story. Eleanor stuttered, her teeth chattering. We should get the doctor. Nonsense, Theodora said, her voice wavering. We don't need him to tell us we're imagining things. We know we're sensitive to this place. We don't need his skepticism. Eleanor's eyes remained fixed on the door, her fear tangible. What about Luke and the others? Moving towards the fireplace, Theodora replied, asleep most likely. And we don't need them. We're strong enough to face this ourselves. Eleanor listened intently, straining to hear beyond the fire's crackle and the thunderous beat of her heart. Do you hear that? Theodora froze, her hand reaching for the poker. What? Whispers, Eleanor said, her eyes widening. Chilling murmurs just at the edge of hearing. They carry a malevolent tone, taunting us. As the whispers grew louder, forming almost recognizable words, the room seemed to press in on them. The air thickened with an unseen, malevolent presence. Do you feel that? Theodora asked, her voice shaking. It's like someone's walking over my grave. A chill runs through me. Eleanor nodded, her eyes never leaving the door. I think something's out there. Beyond the door. A loud bang echoed through the house, making them jump. Hollow thuds followed, moving closer down the hallway with each step. It's coming from the stairs, Eleanor cried, her voice filled with dread. For a moment, Theodora and Eleanor stood frozen, their gazes locked, fear reflecting in their eyes. Then, Theodora grabbed the poker and rushed to the door, her voice steady. Stay behind me. As she swung the door open, a rush of cold air pushed against them, an almost tangible force. The hallway beyond lay dark and seemingly empty, but the faint echo of retreating footsteps sent a chill down their spines. Theodora stepped forward, the poker raised. Show yourself! Silence answered her challenge. The whispers had ceased, and the cold spots seemed to have retreated with whatever presence had been lurking in the house. Eleanor and Theodora stood in the doorway, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. Slowly they stepped back, their eyes never leaving the empty hallway. Eleanor's voice shook as she asked what just happened. Theodora shook her head, her eyes reflecting fear and determination. I don't know, but we won't let it drive us away. We came here knowing the risks. We will face them head on. Eleanor's fear gave way to resolve. You're right. We stand together against whatever Hill House throws at us. With shaking hands and brave hearts, they prepared for whatever came next, their bonds strengthened by their shared experience in the face of the unknown. The darkness and cold of Hill House seemed to retreat, at least for now, as they stood united. As they stood there, the darkness seemed to recede, and the cold air lost some of its bite. Theodora's grip on the poker relaxed, and Eleanor's eyes slowly left the doorway. They exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. Theodora spoke first, her voice low and resolute. We need to talk about this, about what just happened. Eleanor nodded, her teeth still chattering slightly. Yes, we need to figure out what's going on in this house. Without another word, they stepped back into the parlor, the fire's warmth enveloping them like a comforting blanket. As they sat down, their quilts wrapped tightly around them, the silence between them was heavy with unspoken questions. But they knew that they would face whatever Hill House had in store for them, together and unafraid. The Planchette's revelation. The room was bathed in a flickering glow from the candles arranged in a circle on the floor, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Eleanor sat with her hands gently resting on the planchette, a small heart-shaped wooden piece that served as their link to the spirit world. Mrs. Montague, her face stern and eyes intense, presided over the séance with an air of authority. "Spirits of Hill House, we invite you to speak to us," she intoned, her voice low and commanding. "Share your messages through this vessel." As if by its own volition, the planchette began to move, causing Eleanor to gasp and her heart to pound. It slid smoothly across the surface, spelling out a chilling message. "Lost. Mother, child," Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling as she read the words formed by the planchette's erratic dance. "Who are they referring to?" Mrs. Montague demanded, her voice rising in frustration as the planchette paused in its movement. "Spirits. Reveal your secrets." Eleanor, her voice barely audible, said, "I don't know. It feels like they're speaking of a mother and her lost child." Arthur, his face a mask of curiosity, leaned forward. "Could it be their family? Spirits? Are you trying to tell us about your loved ones?" As they waited with bated breath, the planchette remained stubbornly still. Mrs. Montague's face twisted with anger, her frustration palpable. "Your disbelief silences them," she accused, her eyes flashing. "You must open your hearts and minds to truly hear their voices." Luke, seated in a corner, broke the tense silence with a chuckle. "Maybe they're just camera shy," he quipped, lightening the mood. Eleanor, however, felt a pang of annoyance at his attempt to make light of the situation. In that moment, she felt a deep connection to the lost spirits, their grief mirroring her own hidden sorrow. The room fell silent once more, the air thick with anticipation. Mrs. Montague closed her eyes, her lips moving silently in prayer, beseeching the spirits to speak again. Suddenly, the planchette jerked into motion, causing Eleanor to flinch. Mrs. Montague sighed, her shoulders slumping in disappointment. "They often repeat themselves," she murmured. "Spirits tend to be creatures of habit." Theodora, her voice dripping with sarcasm, spoke up. "Or maybe they're as unamused by this as we are." Eleanor's thoughts lingered on the words mother and child long after the séance ended. She felt an inexplicable bond with the lost spirits, their sense of longing and despair echoing her own. As she lay awake that night, the planchette's message haunted her, and she knew her journey with Hill House had only just begun. The house, with its whispers and shadows, had become a reflection of her soul, and she found herself drawn to its mysterious depths, longing to uncover the secrets it held. The Iron Stairway. The Iron Stairway. Eleanor stood at the base of the iron stairway, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the cold metal. The house was quiet, and she could hear her own heartbeat, a rapid drumming in her ears. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Theodora's voice was laced with concern, but Eleanor barely heard her. "I have to," Eleanor replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know if it's real, if I'm not just imagining things." With a determined nod, she began to ascend the stairway. Each step creaked under her weight. Halfway up, she paused, looking back at Theodora, who stood at the bottom, wringing her hands. "Be careful, Eleanor," Theodora called out. "Remember what Dr. Montague said about the dangers." Eleanor nodded. She felt a strange pull to continue, as if the house itself was beckoning her. She resumed her climb, the iron steps spiraling upwards into darkness. As she reached the top, she whispered to herself, "I am home." Suddenly, a soft giggle echoed through the stairwell, and Eleanor spun around. There was no one there, just the empty steps winding back down. "It's just a house," she said aloud, trying to convince herself. "It can't hurt me." She took a deep breath and continued to explore. The house seemed to come alive with her presence. the walls whispering secrets she couldn't quite understand. She felt a connection to Hill House that she couldn't explain, a bond that was both exhilarating and terrifying. As she wandered through the upper corridors, she stumbled upon a room filled with old toys. A dollhouse, a rocking horse, and a ball that rolled to her feet as if pushed by an unseen hand. Eleanor picked up the ball, tossing it gently in the air and catching it with a laugh. "You want to play?" she asked the empty room, feeling a sense of camaraderie with the spirits of the house. But as she turned to leave, the ball rolled after her, stopping at her feet. Eleanor's laughter faded, replaced by unease. As the ball rolled to a stop, Eleanor's eyes widened in surprise. There, standing in the doorway, was a young girl with long dark hair and a sad smile. She wore a tattered dress, and her feet were bare against the cold floor. "Who are you?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady despite the surreal situation. The girl remained silent, her gaze conveying an understanding beyond her years. She motioned for Eleanor to follow her deeper into the room. With a cautious step, Eleanor complied, her curiosity overcoming her apprehension. The girl led her to a small, ornate box on the floor. She opened it to reveal a collection of photographs, images of the house throughout different eras. Eleanor asked, pointing to the girl in the photo. The girl nodded, her expression somber. "I was once part of this house just as you are now," she said, her voice barely audible. Eleanor felt a profound connection to the girl in the house, a sense of history and mystery intertwining. The girl placed her hand on the photo and the images began to move, playing out scenes from the past. Eleanor watched, and the images began to move. Eleanor nodded, a mix of fear and the departure. The morning sun barely made its way through the dense fog surrounding Hill House as Eleanor stood at the top of the stairs, suitcase in hand. Dr. Montague approached her, his face stern yet not unkind. "Eleanor, it's time," he said gently. Luke and Mrs. Montague waited by the car, their expressions a mixture of relief and concern. Theodora stood a little apart, her vibrant eyes filled with an emotion Eleanor couldn't quite read. "I don't want to go," Eleanor whispered. "You're not alone," Theodora said, stepping forward. "You have us, even when we're not here." Dr. Montague placed a hand on Eleanor's shoulder, urging her towards the waiting car. Eleanor took a deep breath, looking back at the house before stepping into the car without another word. As they drove away, she didn't look back, her thoughts already turning to the road ahead, to the future and all its possibilities.